Hey guys, it's me, Miss Norris, and today I'd like to share a fun read aloud with you of the story Mr. Putter and Tabby See the Stars. The story Mr. Tabby and Putter See the Stars was written in 2007 by Cynthia Rylant and was illustrated by Arthur Howard, and it tells the story of two of my favorite characters, Mr. Putter and his cat, Tabby. If you're ready to hear the story, I'm ready to share it with you. Here we go. Mr. Putter and Tabby see the stars. You can see at the beginning they're napping outside in their hammock. Chapter 1 Logs. Mr. Putter and his fine cat Tabby loved to sleep. They could sleep anywhere. Me too. I love naps. They slept in chairs, in swings, in cars, in tubs, and sometimes in the laundry room. They napped all over the place, but always together. How sweet. Mr. Putter and Tabby also slept in a bed. Of course, most of the time sleeping in a bed was just fine. Mr. Putter plumped his pillow, Tabby squished hers, and then they slept like logs. But one night, one of the logs could not sleep. So they sometimes sleep in a bed, and Tabby fluffs her pillow, and Mr. Putter fluffs his, and they sleep like logs. But one night, do you see which log is missing? It's Mr. Putter. He couldn't sleep. Chapter 2 Grumble. Mr. Putter was the log who could not sleep. Did you guess that? He could not sleep because he'd eaten too many pineapple jelly rolls at Mrs.Teaberry's house. So he was having trouble sleeping because his tummy felt bad. He ate too many sweets. Mrs. Teaberry was Mr. Putter's good friend and neighbor. She liked to feed him. She liked to feed everybody, but most of all, she liked to feed Mr. Putter. She was always sending her good dog Zeke over to Mr. Putter's house with a note. The note always said, "Are you hungry?" And Mr. Putter always said, "Yes." So he and Tabby went next door a lot. There's Mrs. Teaberry and her good dog Zeke, and he brings over notes in his mouth to give to Mr. Putter and Tabby. But tonight, Mr. Putter had been having such a good time that he lost track and ate 21 jelly rolls. He forgot to count them as he popped them one at a time into his mouth. And before he knew it, 21 jelly rolls were gone, and it was time to go home. So he wasn't paying attention, and he ate 21 jelly rolls, and then it was time to go home. Mrs. Teaberry was happy that Mr. Putter enjoyed her jelly rolls so much, but Mr. Putter's stomach was not. It grumbled and grumbled and grumbled. Mr. Putter looked at his nice soft bed when he got home. "Grumble," grumbled his stomach. Mr. Putter knew he would not be able to sleep with all that grumbling. What to do? Mr. Putter looked at Tabby. Then he got an idea. So you could see Mr. Putter's tummy's making lots of grumbly sounds, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to sleep. Fortunately, he had an idea. Chapter 3 Stars. "Let's go for a walk," Mr. Putter said. He put his coat back on. He put his hat back on. He picked up Tabby, and out the door they went. You can see that Tabby looks she's happy, but very surprised to be going out in the dark. It was a beautiful night. The moon was full and moonlight was everywhere. So now that they're outside, they both seem a lot happier. It was a beautiful night. Tabby looked, she listened, she twitched her ears, she twitched her tail. She loved the night. Mr. Putter loved it too, even with a grumbly stomach. So it turns out that they both really enjoyed being outside in the night, even if their tummies were grumbly. Mr. Putter looked up at the sky. He showed Tabby the stars, and he told her all about them. He told her that the Big Dipper was full of milk from the Milky Way. Tabby purred. Brrr. She loved milk. So Mr. Putter and Tabby didn't just look at the stars. Mr. Putter was teaching Tabby about certain constellations like the Big Dipper. He told her about looking at stars when he was a boy and how he had always wanted to ride in a rocket ship. He told her how he had always dreamed of adventure. So there's a picture of Mr. Putter reminiscing about being a boy and wanting to go in a spaceship that he calls the Putter ship. Tabby purred some more. Purr. Mr. Putter and Tabby made a nice big circle around the neighborhood. Tabby enjoys hearing stories, and now she feels not so nervous being outside at night. They looked at the sky. They looked at the yellow lights of the houses. They looked at cats sitting in windows, looking back at them. So they looked at porches and lights and other kitties that seem as surprised to see Mr. Putter and Tabby as Mr. Putter and Tabby seemed to see them. And when at last they circled back home, they stopped in front of Mrs. Teaberry's house. Mrs. Teaberry and Zeke were on the front lawn. "Mrs. Teaberry, what are you doing up?" asked Mr. Putter. "Zeke has a grumbly stomach," said Mrs. Teaberry. "He ate too many jelly rolls and we can't sleep." So Mrs. Teaberry and her good dog Zeke are also up looking at the night sky because Zeke ate too many jelly rolls too. Mr. Putter and Tabby were delighted. They sat on the lawn with Mrs. Teaberry and Zeke. Mr. Putter's stomach and Zeke's stomach talked to each other while Mr. Putter and Mrs. Teaberry talked to each other. So Mr. Putter's tummy and Zeke's tummy both grumbled at each other, and Mr. Putter and Mrs. Teaberry chit-chatted, and Tabby just looked on at Zeke, trying to figure out what his tummy was trying to say. They told stories in the moonlight. They told secrets. They made each other laugh. Then, when the stomachs on the front lawn stopped grumbling, everyone said goodnight, went to bed, and slept like logs. You can see Mr. Putter and Tabby are sleeping like logs. Mrs. Teaberry and her good dog Zeke are sleeping like logs. In the morning, Mr. Putter heard a scratching at the door. He opened it. It was Zeke with a note. The note said, "Are you hungry?" Zeke's coming with another note in the morning, and both Zeke and Tabby look excited to be going somewhere. Mr. Putter smiled. He picked up Tabby, and together they walked next door. Look how happy Tabby is. And Mrs. Teaberry is happy. She's baked something, it looks like. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed the story, Mr. Putter and Tabby See the Stars. I just love these two. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the page. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. If you're not a subscriber yet, please click that subscribe button down at the bottom of the page. And don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified when there's new content. I hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.